Hey guys, glad you can join another confusion episode. Dark Saber. Hey! Now in the last episode we've created this lightsaber's body, and today I want to show you how to get from this result to this. Now, this image is a completely different quality, and even here in the buttons you can see these nice reflections, although we're going to replace this with lights later. You can see this is a completely different quality we have here compared to this, okay? And now I'm going to show you how I actually did that. Now, as I mentioned before, it's not a problem of the setup. It's just tweaking values and altering the HDR map. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So first, let me go through this comp here and show you what I actually changed. Okay, now the most crucial change I did was the HDR map. Now you can see this is the HDR map of the new version, and this is the HDR of the old version. And you can already see this looks very cheesy compared to this one. Other than that, I just reduced the strength of the reflections a little bit, and I moved the red lights that are on the left, on the right side. I moved a little bit backwards, but this is about it. The most crucial change is really this HDR map. So let me show you how to get there. So first I'm gonna get some little space here. So we're gonna clean up this comp later, because if we continue like this, we're gonna end up in a huge chaos. But for now, let's just go with this, and we're gonna focus on the HDR here. Okay, so this was the HDR map, and I added this light here, and then I tinted the whole thing with this color corrector, and we just get rid of this one. Okay. But what I do now is, right after the HDR image, I hook in a color corrector and I bring down the gain, I reduce saturation, and I move the hue to the opposite of the red to kind of cancel out the reddish. So that I get something like this, maybe a little bit into the greenish. Well, something like this perhaps. Okay, of course, because we want to adjust the reflections, it's a good idea to render this thing out already. And I'm gonna add a gamut here as well. Okay, now since we want to focus on the reflections, it's a good idea to temporarily turn off all lights. Now what you see is 100% the reflection. It doesn't look too shabby already, does it? Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to make this actually red, and I give the red here a 50 and the other one I leave at 5.5, or actually let's put this down to 1. And this red light, I want to come sort of from the right side. And the thing is, if I move this here, I could place it somewhat like this, and I will leave it for now because later I'm gonna realign the HDR map anyway. So for now, let's just copy this whole thing and hook it in using Shift. Good. And let's see how this looks. And this one here, I actually want to be a cancel out. For this, I put all to 0. And then I'm gonna invert the mask, and I'm gonna make this big. And the reason why I do this now here is because on the left side, I want to have a dark side here, sort of like a Terminator. Something like this perhaps. Move a little bit to the right to get the shadow more to the left. Something like this, for example. And now don't worry about this being too black, because once we turn on the ambient light, the whole thing will be brightened up. And while we're already here, let's just neutralize this ambient light to something like this. Yes, it's not too bad. And maybe perhaps reduce the brightness. We just want to get rid of the very black areas. Perhaps something like this. And maybe put a little bit more blue in there. Let's leave it at that for now. Let's make a copy of the red light and hook this in already and view it. So this is going to be a white. So let's make this all 555, and I'm gonna move this up here. And for the shape and size of this light, I'm gonna go with something like this. Reduce the softness maybe a little bit. And now this looks sort of like a light is shining on this part. But here at this point, I want to align the sphere map a little bit. Although this looks kind of interesting. But I actually want to achieve vertical reflection, right, that goes through the whole body to emphasize on the round shape of the lightsaber's body. It's always a good thing to use the reflections to emphasize on the shapes or on the objects shape. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to take this field map tool here and I'm going to rotate this. I think it was about 103 or something like this, and I'm going to change. Yep, and here we go. So I'm going to put this to something like, let's make it 128. Oh, and that looks very nice. Look at this reflection. This looks very nice. It really emphasizes on the body's roundness. And here, let's make it a full number, 103. Okay, it's pretty cool. And here we could readjust the position of the light. For example, if we want to move it a little bit to the left, we move this up here. And let's already copy this because I want another reflection going on here. So, and I'm gonna move this down. And now look what happens. This magic reflection here. Ah, very nice. Now I got some symmetry action going on here, which is pretty nice as the lightsaber's body is also symmetrical. I could say that the whole reflection is a little bit too strong. So I'm gonna reduce this to, let's say, 0.17. Okay, and I'm gonna go back to the red light because I feel it disturbs a little bit here. So I'm gonna move this down here. So I just want to have a hint of the red light coming from the back, or something like this. It's looking not too shabby. That's looking pretty damn good. And now I want to focus, or I want to emphasize on the horizontal part here. For that, I'm going to create another light, a softbox. And this time, I know that the position is about here. And you see what I mean. I want to get a little bit reflection on this area here. But I don't want to destroy what I had here. So I need to reduce the size a little bit. Something like perhaps... Look at this. Look, come closer, man. Closer. Closer, man. So something like this. I can view this here. And now we're gonna make a big decision here. Where do we place this thing in order to not destroy the reflections we have here, but still get the nice line here? You see already that it's very difficult to achieve. And for example, if I find this perfect, I would have to do some masking. We replace the material here. And we replace the material here. That's pretty damn cool. Now we can bring them back together. And let me show you the renderer. And look what we can do now. We have the reflection here without affecting the main body. And I can demonstrate to you by turning this off. Okay, now we have perfect control here. And you could do this for all the parts you have here if you want to do precise alterations. But I think this looks pretty damn good. So for now, let's continue. Let me regroup this here. And now we're going to turn off the lights already. So here we have those two lights, and I think those are the red lights on the left and the right side. And here something really interesting happens, which I want to demonstrate to you. And for that, I keep it. And as I demonstrated in the previous episode, the Embryo Occlusion can dramatically change the quality of your image, if used wisely, I have to say. So just making an Embryo Occlusion and slap it on won't give you a good result, or not always at least. But you can see here how this looks without and with. I mean, look at this. This is completely different. But I already bragged about this before, so yeah, let's move on. After this, I did some post-processing. The first thing I did was I wanted to darken the bottom area to emphasize a little bit more on the top of the lightsaber's body. So I brought down the gain. Gotta view this. So I bring down the gain here, something like this, and maybe move this down and increase the softness. And again, before, after, just a little bit. Make some space here. And now I add another color corrector, and I call this one exposure. So I felt that this thing is a little bit too bright. So I want to show you one very important thing. You might have wondered what this brightness and this contrast sliders are for, because whenever you touch them, the result is so extreme, and you ask yourself, what is this for? I mean, seriously, you see, I mean, this is not usable, you think, right? The brightness and contrast go hand in hand. It means when you reduce the brightness here, you also have to counteract with the contrast slider here, okay? So it's always good to actually show you what's going on here by turning on this bad boy. Okay, so let's bring this back. Okay, so if I reduce the brightness, you can see that it affects the whole range, and we are going into the black values. Okay, allow me to explain using this blackboard here. So what we have here is the unmodified color values ranging from 0 to 1. Then we have the brightness and the contrast. And I want to give you a visual explanation on what is going on here when we tweak the brightness or the contrast. So by reducing the brightness, the whole color range, not only 0 to 1, but all the color range will move downwards. If we would increase the brightness, the whole color range will go up. In our case, we reduce the brightness, something like this. Then the contrast. Now, if we would increase the contrast, let's move this down first to our result that we get by tweaking the brightness, something like this. So now we would increase the contrast. And what will happen is something like this. The whole range will be squeezed, will be stretched out. In our case, we reduce the contrast, which leads to something like this. So one thing you have to be careful now is the reason why we get the very strange result when tweaking only the brightness contrast is because of what's happening here. Now you have to see that everything that is below this line is going to become black, absolute black. Now here we have the minus values or blacks. Another thing you might wonder is what happens to the range here. Now, if we would have a 8-bit integer image, we would have no color information here. Basically, all the whites would become sort of like gray. But since we're working in 16-bit float, we are actually having colors up here as well. So it means here we still have values. Here we still have values. So we're gonna bring this down here, and then we also bring down the contrast. You can also see the effect that we are bringing back the blacks here, and now we get this nice sort of a vintage look here. Then I turn off and on. So lookup table, and now I can use these lookup tables here, and I'm gonna load the blue undertones, and I get something awesome like this. Okay, it's not looking too shabby. Be aware that I used it only like 50%, and then I used another one, but this time I loaded the Optimer 200. This also is used about 50%, and after that I apply a resize, and I'm gonna keep the frame aspect ratio, and I'm gonna reduce this to 1000 or full HD. It should keep the frame aspect. Yeah, I have to view it first, then it will automatically resize it. And after I resized it, I'm gonna add a film grain. The reason why I apply the film grain after the resize is because I don't want the resize to alter my film grain. As you know, the film grain is very fine, and by resizing it down, it will sort of crunch all the grains together, and the noise will lose the quality. And now to give this a little bit more sharpness, I decided to use an Unsharp Filter or an Unsharp mask, and I'm gonna do this after the gamut. And if I zoom in here, it should pop, and it popped. You can reduce the gain a little bit since the Unsharp default settings are very strong. And what I used in my other comp is an overlay texture. I'm just gonna paste it in here right after the gamut. And what it looks like, I'll show you. This is the texture, very cheesy. And I'm gonna add a tint here. And then I overlaid this here. Let me turn on and off. You can see, very nice detail. And again, let's go back to the film grain. And we have this very, very sexy looking lightsaber. Now, one thing you have to be careful again is the black values. So if I turn this on, let me see. Looks like we are good. I can't see it now for some reason. I think it's due to the recording. I can't see the values because everything is bright down here. Yeah, I need to upgrade my recording software. But you can use these viewers or color inspector. You can see if we have some black values. I think here there was some minus. I spotted some minus values. It could be that the Unsharp creates some black values, but another thing, it's always good before you apply a lot to clamp or to clip the black values. It's very important, and everything should be fine. Another thing I like to do is I like to add the color curve. It's also important to do it before the LUT. Depends. You have to watch out. You have to see what happens and decide. Okay, you could see that something happens here. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this episode. In the next episode, we're gonna clean up this whole flow, because if we continue like this, we will end up in a huge mess, because we're gonna create more passes. And yeah, so in the next episode we clean this up and we bring in the lightsaber's blades, and then we finally make this thing look hot. My name is Vito. I'll see you soon. Until then, enjoy what you're doing. See ya. Hey guys, it's me again. I'm back. I forgot something. I forgot something, and I forgot something. I actually forgot something. While looking at the video, I thought, hey, you know what? You know, this thing is actually still too bright. I mean, it's a dark saber. So I've decided, go in here. After the color curves, I applied a color correction. And what I did now is actually I brought the gamma even further down. Okay. And this will make the highlights even pop out even nicer. And another thing I wanted to do is in the shadows, I want to lift the blues ever so slightly. Zoom in closely. And you need to be aware now, because we haven't divided the alpha. And if we lift now, it will actually also lift the alpha as well. What you can do to avoid this is go over to this options button and you just check pre-divide, post-multiply. Now this is the easiest way to do it. And let me compare this before and after. And we have some issues going on here. This is also because of the Embryo Occlusion. The Embryo Occlusion's edges are not so accurate, but we're gonna fix this later. We don't have to worry about this at the moment. Again, before and after. Now this adds a little bit more sweetness to it. Hope you like it, and I'm off again. Yeah, so see you later.